Hey everyone, this is a VoD review of Golden Guardians versus Optic. I'm John Valentine, and let's get into it. So, starting off, I cannot stand this draft out of Optic. So, they picked the Zillion, knowing it was into Lissandra. That's a losing matchup, and sure, it's an outscale matchup, so you can accept that you're going to lose lane and have like this solid wave clear and going to be more powerful in the later stages of the game. However, they then also pick the Kog'Maw into the Varus, which is, again, another kind of bully matchup. And yeah, Kog'Maw can win that matchup if he has a support that kind of wins it for him. Like, if Kog'Maw has a range support or some sort of hard aggro support, then he can very safely, like, just pop the W and get off a bunch of damage. But Braum is really strong into that, and Tahm Kench doesn't provide that whatsoever. So looking at this draft just on the bottom side of the map, Optic is significantly disadvantaged until the game gets to the 30-40 minute point, because even if you survive the laning phase and you go even or just a little bit behind on the Kog'Maw Zillion, like Lissandra and Varus are still going to pump out some pretty significant DPS, and considering there's no real frontline on the side of Optic, if Lissandra ults someone, Zillion pretty much has to ult them, or Tahm Kench has to devour them in order for them to survive, in which case the Kindred, Varus, and Aatrox DPS and CC can all get pumped in onto some other person who will just die, because there isn't anybody who can really absorb any of that. On top of that, this top lane matchup is a fairly even one. You would expect with top lane counterpick, you would have a winning matchup, and Camille into Aatrox isn't that highly favored top lane matchup you're really looking for, which means that Optic doesn't really have much of a point of pressure anywhere. Yes, J4 is stronger than the Kindred early. However, if GGS has pressure in all of their lanes, Kindred is still going to kind of get free reign of J4's jungle and is going to be able to pick up those stacks, which is the next reason why Optic's team composition is really poor, is that it lets this Kindred just kind of run hog wild. You never want to let Kindred have winning lanes like this, because they are going to just be able to farm up a bunch of stacks very, very quickly, and J4 isn't going to be able to contest them because he's forced to play around his lanes, and Kindred can just push up because her lanes are pushing. So already we're seeing, there's a stack on Kindred, but that was just scuttle luck. But we're seeing huge pressure in both bot side lanes for Golden Guardians, which means Kindred gets to push up aggressively into the blue side jungle. I don't know if that mark on the Gromp spawned before or after Contracts killed the Gromp. So he might be at 2 stacks here, he might just be at the 1. But we're seeing, look, Dokla is chunked. This is your top lane counterpick. This is the main advantage you get for being on red side, and it's not really getting Optic much at all. So the map plays out. Yes, Froggen's gonna get chunked and shoved out by Meteos, and that's kind of going to be the majority of what Meteos is able to do this game, is with the J4 pressure that Kindred doesn't necessarily have. He's going to get to show up in lanes and kind of make lanes that shouldn't have pressure, such as shows up into mid lane. Now the mid wave is shoving into the Lissandra. It allows Optic a little more breathing room. But if you're looking at this top lane matchup, we're seeing, yeah, there's a 1-0 CS lead, and Haunter's up a pot, and they have even health, and Dokla's at half mana. This is a nightmare for Optic, almost, right? The matchups are not going in a feasible way, and they picked themselves into this. And you can say, well, it's Optic is playing to scale, but they kind of aren't, right? They picked Zillion, they picked this kind of horrendous Kog'Maw Tahm Kench lane, which already on its own should very immediately communicate, okay, Optic never wants to go bottom lane, it wants to send the jungler top lane all the time and win top super hard, because this bot lane is never accomplishing anything. Its goal is to not die and farm and scale. Same is true with the mid lane. Mid lane's never realistically accomplishing much. The goal of the Zillion is to farm and wave clear and scale, basically. that on its own sets up a very predictable play pattern for Optic, and therefore one that is very easy for the Golden Guardians to counter out, right? If GGS knows the way that Optic cannot feasibly gank bottom lane and cannot easily gank mid lane, it's very easy for Hanser to back up, make sure he's warded defensively, and allow Contracts to pressure hard the both blue side jungles to basically shut Meteos out of the game and not allow Optic to operate its game plan, right? They can't get any snowball or any advantage going in the top side if you as Golden Guardians know that that's what they're doing and can play around that. And because of how linear the early game for the Optic team composition is, it's really predictable that that's what they're going to try to do. And if they try to do anything else, they're not going to accomplish anything. On top of that, the team fight for this Optic composition is, I would say, highly questionable. Kog'Maw is a champion that needs to desperately play around specific windows and really, really wants front to back. He wants to be chunking on a tank from long range to make use of that % health damage and that incredible buff he gets on the W. That goes kind of completely contrary to what Camille J4 Zillion want, which is these kind of big high DPS or high burst damage carries who dive in and get resurrected with Zillion ult and provide a bunch of pressure, right? Like that. That would synergize maybe a bit better with a Vayne or maybe a Kaisa or some other AD carry that wants these kind of chaotic, divey team fights. But Kog'Maw is going to find himself having a very difficult time applying significant pressure or significant DPS into one of these team fights because either the members of Golden Guardians are basically doing enough DPS and have enough threat to force Arrow out of a fight, or they're dead anyway because the Camille and the J4 and the Zillion have killed them anyway. So this Kog'Maw as a scaling hyper carry isn't really going to be able to fulfill much of a role with the way Optic's team composition has kind of built. And it's very unfortunate. It's kind of very poorly planned out. So we're already seeing, right, losing lanes on the bottom side of the map. A very easy time for Golden Guardians to play around this top side. Kindred's counter ganks are very strong. Hanser can accept losing a bit of CS to Meteos being top lane and just playing back and making sure they're tracking Meteos very well on the top side of the map. And so far, Optic has provided GGS a lot of ways to play around them and to play League of Legends. And they have not provided themselves very many. And that's going to lead to advantages on the side of Golden Guardians pretty much everywhere on the map. Right? We're at 8 minutes, 9 minutes. Kindred already has 2 stacks. We have pushing lanes. Like here. Let's count. Bring in our old friend the count. We've got 1 losing lane. 2 losing lanes. 3 losing lanes. And that's 3 strikes. You are out for Optic. Like they don't have much they can do here. Yes, top lane is an area where they have agency, right? But it is the only area where they have agency. Golden Guardians have the ability to pressure all of these side lanes and shut out a lot of what Optic is trying to do. And that is going to make this game very difficult for Optic. Let's back up a little bit to take a look at this fight. So it starts out with Golden Guardians doing really what Golden Guardians should be doing, is expected to be doing here, which is pushing in aggressively to this jungle. There's a Kindred mark on this Gromp, or there was. I believe the Gromp is down right now. But Golden Guardians doing what you would expect them to. They have pressure in mid, they have pressure in bot. They should get access to this jungle for free. They already picked up a free Ocean Drake because, again, pressure in mid, pressure in bot, it's free. And the way this fight plays out is actually kind of interesting because Optic make the first move. They get the first rotation out of the bot side. Arrow is here first, and this starts off as a 2 versus 3 fight. However, it is a 2 versus 3 fight that is a lose-lose situation for Optic. So the only reason Arrow was able to get to this fight first is because Deathly stayed for a little bit longer and shoved in this wave. So now, if Arrow commits to the fight, then yes, he gets a bit of DPS onto Ollie. He gets a bit of DPS onto Contracts, right? He loses this entire wave, maybe a turret plate. And beyond that, he's not that early in this fight compared to the Varus. So he will get maybe 200, maybe 3-4 auto attacks off before the Varus arrives, at which point it is then an even fight. And Golden Guardian's champions are stronger at this point in the game. Yes, Zilean's level 6, he has that powerful ultimate. Meteos has a lot of damage on the J4 compared to the Kindred. But the Varus is going to provide more damage and more utility than the Kog'Maw. The Lissandra is going to provide more damage, more utility than the Zilean in this sort of a split fight. Meteos' EQ is already down, and it's not going to be up for a few seconds. So this is really already, it's a 3v4 fight. Great for Optic. They made the aggressive play. It's a lose-lose situation. Either they come in and they go even in this fight, and the fight goes well for them, and they get some nice chunks off, and maybe force a recall out of a member of Golden Guardians. I don't think they realistically get a kill because Meteos' dive combo is on cooldown, and Crown doesn't have significant DPS, and Arrow doesn't have significant DPS. And all of the flashes are up on the side of Golden Guardians. But bravo, you won the fight, you got advantage in the fight, you get a little bit of pressure on the map because you chunked out Froggen and forced him to recall and he has no teleport. Good for you. Arrow falls even further behind because he misses that entire wave bot, possibly loses a good chunk of a turret plate, and you didn't actually win. You got a little bit of pressure mid, but you lost a lot of pressure bot, and you lost global gold on your team, and it was a failed fight. Alternatively, the fight could go poorly for Optic, which, surprise, it does. And not only do you still lose all that CS bottom lane, you also lose flashes and health and pressure on the map. So even if the fight goes well for Optic, it doesn't go very well. And this fight, it looks advantageous for the Golden Guardians, but it really is not as much as it seems. So we see it starts out like this. Meteos burns his engage combo. There is not enough damage for a Cataclysm plus whatever DPS Crown is able to provide to kill a Lissandra through her ultimate, right? The Cataclysm takes her probably to about here, maybe a little bit lower. The first bomb hits here, she ults, heals up, second bomb pops on the ulted Lissandra, doesn't do any damage. Lissandra isn't dying here, right? Crown could theoretically throw bombs onto Contracts and Ollie. That would be better, but his bombs are on cooldown, right? He has probably one of them coming back up, but the second bomb definitely not. We saw him use them in this bush just a second ago. So there already are not tools on the side of Optic to do much in this fight. So it's perfectly fine if Deathly shoves out the wave and comes late. And you already see Meteos pretty much immediately makes the call to back off. Arrow also backs off. Crown sticks around for a little bit to try and save big. But Optic's already calling for the disengage because they failed to accomplish anything, because they never were going to accomplish anything in this fight. And now instead of that 4v3 fight, which would have been like maybe slightly favored to Optic, but still not a good situation, now it's just Big getting picked out because Optic burned all of their tools on chunking down the Lissandra, who has Aftershock and the ultimate. And they were never in a position to fight, so moving aggressively into this skirmish situation was never going to be a feasible play. So, Optic going to give up the blue buff, going to give up the Kindred stacked Gromp. I believe this is the fourth stack on the Kindred, and this is pre 10 minutes. The dream scenario for many a Kindred player. And Optic is not winning anywhere on the map. They have no prio top, no prio mid, no prio bottom. They have this Kindred who is getting to be very, very fed. They have this Kog'Maw who is proving to be a true liability. They have this Camille who is also proving to becoming a true liability, because Camille, when she's not ahead, has a very difficult time accomplishing much of anything, and she is very much not ahead. Let's go back and look at this play. So, a few things. A, these two wards are going to be kind of centric to this play. Now, this blue Golden Guardians ward was placed first, which means that Optic did not necessarily have vision of this ward being placed. So they don't necessarily know that this is warded. However, we saw just before the previous team fight that Froggen was sitting in this bush. That's when he placed the ward. And Froggen was sitting in this bush and abusing the Fog of War to try and move into the Optic jungle and get maybe some pressure and some chunks onto the Zillion and what have you. And that's what sparked this past team fight. But this was a bush, specifically, that Froggen was attempting to control earlier. So it was a part of the map that was under Golden Guardian's control. And yeah, you got a ward down, but it's still, all of this section of the map is pretty solidly under GGS control. So as Optic, you should expect there to be Golden Guardian wards in that area. So Meteos is going to come down. He is going to have vision of contracts. He's going to have not direct vision of Froggen, but he knows that he is lurking in this area because he just watched him walk into this bush from the Zillion provided vision. So he knows members of Golden Guardians are there. He is looking to make an aggressive play onto contracts, shove out, chunk him down, force the ultimate, something along those lines. He is assuming that that bush is not warded, because you never would walk into enemy vision when you know they're there like that. That's a suicide. Meteos is smarter than that, so he assumes the bush is not warded. Clearly it is. He should have known it was likely to be warded. He should have known that this is Golden Guardian's territory and not a place he should be venturing to. And he's going to die for it. There's not that much to that play. Meteos walked into Golden Guardian's territory, assuming it when he knew they were there. He assumed there was no vision there. There absolutely was, and he dies for free. Kindred now sitting at 5 stacks after picking up the kill on Meteos. There is still continued pressure. We don't need to watch this replay. There is still continued pressure in all 3 lanes. Ocean Drakes are continuing to go over to Golden Guardians for free, which is going to exacerbate this failed laning phase from Optic. And now, with the Drake down, it is very easy for Optic, if they want, or for Golden Guardians, if they want, to switch their bottom lane top and force down the Rift Herald. That at least would be the textbook play if you are sitting on a normal map state of winning one side of the map and losing the other, traditionally winning bot, losing top. However, Golden Guardians is also winning top because reasons. So they don't even need to swap their bottom lane. They can maintain pressure on the bottom lane and still force down the Rift Herald because they have a winning matchup mid that Optic picked themselves into, and they have a winning matchup top that Optic picked themselves into. And yeah, Meteos comes down and gets a bunch of vision there. That's like something you should be expecting on the side of Golden Guardians, right? But even if they have vision over the Herald. If Golden Guardians can get there first and can have Crown pinned under his turret and Dokla pinned under his turret, right, it's very easy for Golden Guardians to come in and clear out that vision. It's very easy for Golden Guardians to come in and just force the Rift Herald anyway, because any attempt to contest would be losing a bunch of CS, in which case Golden Guardians just back off the Herald, let the Herald reset, and bravo, you've won yourself 15 CS advantage. Or it would be Meteos just going in alone, in which case he would just die. So it's very, very difficult for Optic to really contest the Rift Herald here. And it's going to just go down. We're going to continue to snowball. So they don't... Golden Guardians does not know that Dokla is on a recall. If they did, the immediate instant play would be instantly walk top, drop the Rift Herald top, take the top turret. Easy play. They should still consider doing that, even if Dokla had been there. Just because by choosing to hold the Rift Herald until after turret plates go down, like, their goal with the Herald is going to be to shove down mid turret to open up the map to allow the 1-3-1 to really commence. But they don't need to do that, right? The value they get out of shoving down mid turret a little bit earlier isn't immense. And the 320 gold you get from the 2 free turret plates off of popping the Rift Herald onto the top lane, very significant. That gold advantage going onto the Aatrox Camille matchup, which can be very swingy, also a really powerful option. And ultimately, it's to some extent an issue of guaranteed advantage is worth more than a possible future advantage. So dropping the Rift Herald top lane immediately there, when you know Meteos isn't in the area, or they would have aggressively contested the Rift Herald, and you know Dokla isn't in the area, or he would have been pushing out that lane harder instead of letting it meet in the middle. So immediately dropping the Rift Herald top is a guaranteed advantage of 320 gold plus some turret damage. Maybe you even get the top lane turret because of the state of the map at the time, compared to the possibility of getting the full mid lane turret with it. So yes, getting the full mid lane turret is worth more than picking up 2 plates on the top lane turret, but you're just as likely to get the full mid lane turret as the full top lane turret. Probably more likely to get the full top lane turret, actually, because of the pressure bot can very easily force Meteos to spend time on the bottom side of the map. And the turret plate gold as a guaranteed advantage immediately is just more valuable than a minor map advantage. And the additional pressure that you get onto the Aatrox by having that gold specifically onto him is also worth more than just having the mid turret down sooner. If Aatrox starts hard winning this top lane matchup, you're going to get other turrets for free, right? So I disagree with Golden Guardians choosing to save the Herald and drop it mid lane. I think that's a mistake. If you drop it top, you get the 3 turret snowball very easily, because we just saw they're going to get the bot lane turret on their own because of how hard this Varus is winning. And if you get the top lane turret with the Herald with this hard winning top lane matchup, it's very easy to send your bottom lane mid and put Froggen or Aatrox on Haunter's Aatrox in the bottom lane and initiate the 1-3-1, and you're going to get the mid turret for free then too, right? Because you're basically, it's the same as the bot lane matchup. Now maybe junglers are contributing, but if the bottom lane matchup can get the turret easily, which they just did, we saw that, they can get the mid lane turret just as easily. But anyway, it's still a show of Golden Guardians dominating Optic for the most part. There are still 3 losing lanes on Optic. There is still this very powerful Kindred who has quite a few stacks and is scaling up. There is still the superior front to back on the side of the Golden Guardians. They have the disengage tools in terms of the Kindred, in terms of the Lissandra, to help shut down the Optic dive. And the Zillion ult can only be used on one person. You can't ult both Camille and J4, right? You cannot protect your diving in Camille plus J4 and stop the Aatrox from flanking your Kog'Maw. And Aatrox is very strong into Tahm Kench because he's capable of crowd controlling both the Tahm Kench and the Kog'Maw. So he can not just lock up Kog'Maw, but lock up Kog'Maw while preventing Tahm Kench from eating him and saving him. It's very difficult to look at these team compositions and look at the state of the map and find any way that a fight could be advantageous for Optic. Really quick, looking at this kind of play in the mid lane. For any budding Lissandra players out there, you should liberally, if you know you're not going to be under any sort of jungle pressure, you should liberally use your claw to clear waves. Because A, it is a powerful wave clear tool, and having that pressure onto waves is useful. But B, one of the advantages you get out of that is if you regularly use your claw for wave clear, then you can use your claw on the wave and your opponent will think, okay, it's another wave clear claw, because that's what they've all been, right? And then what you do is you take that wave clear claw, and you can get much closer with your claws than you could otherwise get, because what basically happens is the opponent is forced to either back off every time you use your claw for wave clear, in which case you get a bunch of extra pressure, and especially in a matchup like this where Lissandra already has pressure, or B, allow themselves to get hit with the Lissandra combo by disrespecting every single claw. And that's what happens here. Crown basically sits right on top of that claw because he expects it's just for wave clear, but Froggen actually takes it, gets a great trade because his bottom lane was rushing in at the same time. Optic don't lose anything for it, besides any sort of presence in their topside jungle, but they didn't really have that to begin with. But either way, we're really seeing these lane matchups are absolutely falling apart for Optic, and that's really the crux of this game, right? We can talk about things like the Rift Herald maneuvers and the Dragon RNG getting 2 powerful laning drakes and then 2 powerful scaling drakes, and we can talk about using the claw in ways that help shut down your lane and things like that. But ultimately what this game came down to is Optic had 3 losing lanes, and not only did they have 3 losing lanes, they had 3 losing lanes against a Kindred, who is one of, if not the best champion, or jungle champion, to punish a team that has three pressured lanes. And people flame Optic for not making aggressive plays and quote-unquote doing nothing and losing the game, but that's what you sign up for when you pick a team composition like this, right? If you pick a mid laner who has no lane pressure and a bot lane duo that has no lane pressure, you are basically signing up to not have much agency in the game. You are saying, okay, we're going to do nothing and try and survive for as long as possible, and then fight later. So Optic don't have a choice. Optic are required to play safe, play defensively. They honestly should consider just seeding this mid lane turret. It is currently allowing them to safely farm the Raptors and the Wolves, which they may not be able to do if they lose the mid lane turret. But to some extent, they are unable to pressure onto those same jungle camps because they are pinned under that mid lane outer turret, which is doomed to go down eventually, and prolonging its life isn't necessarily getting Optic much at all, other than, I guess, keeping GGS in this mid lane nay-ramming for some reason. Lissandra really should be spending her time top lane right now. It's a little bit difficult with the fact that Contracts is on the bottom side and controlling the bottom side jungle vision instead of the top side jungle vision. And just by the fact that all of Golden Guardian's vision right now is honestly too far back. They have this huge advantage, and they absolutely could and should be pushing their vision more aggressively into the Optic jungle instead of kind of festering in the river, which is what they've been doing. And yeah, they keep control over this dragon pit, and they're going to keep stacking up dragons, but they could be taking more. They could be more aggressively contesting jungle camps, and they could be more aggressively pulling Optic apart across the map to allow them to slowly drain any resources from Optic. Dragon, however, is a perfectly viable win condition in of itself, and that's what Optic chooses to go with. Backing up a bit, we're seeing again we're seeing Golden Guards again opting out of the 1-3-1, which is incredibly advantageous for them. Lissandra is very solid in the 1v1. Zilean is actually terrible in a 1v1. Zilean needs to be teamfighting. If he's ulting himself, that's not accomplishing anything, right? He needs to be ulting a teammate so that the teammate can do their full thing and then survive and get out and whatever. So Zilean in a side lane is very, very weak, and Golden Guardians is just choosing not to take advantage of that. Coming out of this recall, we have Froggen pathing back mid when he absolutely should have been pathing top, because they know Zilean's up there. They saw him clearing the wave back here. And yeah, he could theoretically have just been slowly walking down to maybe come and contest this Drake, but there is no world in which Optic is ever contesting that Drake. Look at the bottom lane. Look at the jungle. Like, look at the river. There's no way that this Drake is ever, like, being contested by Optic. Maybe they Zilean ult in 2 people and instantly die, but the dragon is free. You don't need Froggen walking up. And even if you're nervous about the dragon, you have teleport. So, like, worst case scenario, you can teleport to the Drake. So Froggen comes mid. Maybe he thinks he's going to shove down this mid lane turret or help pressure the Drake, but he really should just be top lane. And because he chooses to go mid and help with the Drake instead of allowing his team to take it themselves and going top lane as he should be, they're going to lose a turret in trade, which is just sloppy from GGS. You don't want to be trading objectives when ahead. It's just very poor. And there is possibly a world in which this full damage stopwatch J4 and this completed Seraph's Zilean can tower dive the Lissandra, who does not have a stopwatch. That reasonably could happen. However, with the Lissandra ultimate, with the wave clear you can get, with the defensive tools provided by the Claw, with the fact that Lissandra ultimate is so strong at denying Zilean's damage, it is difficult for that dive to go through. And while there is absolutely a world in which Froggen does die in a turret dive like that, it saves enough time, it takes enough time for the Drake to go down, and Haunter can teleport up. Yes, Arrow and Dokla can also teleport up, but if they do, then you're still getting the Drake. You lose a fight in the top lane and the top lane turret, but now you get mid turret, right? And if the bot wave is shoved as it was looking to be, you can also get a bot turret. At which point, yes, you're trading, but you're trading significantly up. So sending Froggen mid, I don't think was a wise choice. You have this huge advantage in the 1-3-1, and it's really disappointing to see Golden Guardians refusing to make use of it. So GGS going to push for a Baron they don't have much of a right to take. They were unable to get that vision control. There are multiple control wards, but because they chunked out Meteos and Optic, this is, I think, the big example of Optic not making the aggressive play, one they could be. We're seeing GGS on the Baron. Yes, Kindred Ultimate is an incredibly powerful tool for contesting it, but you have Flash, Zillion ult, Hextech Ultimatum on the Camille, right? It would be very easy for right here, Camille to hookshot into the pit, either go for a knockup onto a player, if possible, the Baron might be in the way, or go to pick up these Zillion bombs and then Hextech Ultimatum onto probably Ale, because that would push Contracts out of the pit. And then you could consider going for some sort of Baron contest play. As is, Meteos got chunked out, had to flash, gives up the Baron for free. This was to some extent messy from Golden Guardians. They were very quick to go to the Baron, which they should have been, because they did have this advantage of Meteos being super chunked, but they didn't do the proper prep, right? They didn't set up the Baron. They didn't get that vision advantage. They didn't have that pick threat, that Fog of War threat onto the Optic jungle. They didn't have that advantage. So Meteos could have stayed, right? Low health, but there's a control ward here. He could have sat in this bush and possibly gone for a steal, right? There were many ways that Optic could have contested that Baron. I talked about how Dokla could have gone in, Meteos could have stayed. Golden Guardians opened themselves up. They gave Optic something they could do. And yes, it all worked out for them. They got the Baron. They're going to push this advantage and get a big advantage in both gold and map pressure because of this. But against a better team, that Baron play might have been punished. So I would have preferred to see Optic maybe taking it a little bit slower there, making sure those control wards for Optic were not able to come down, so that Golden Guardians could make that a more guaranteed Baron play. Because with the pressure and advantage they have on the map, they absolutely could have had the Baron guaranteed to them instead of taking that risk. And now we're seeing the Aatrox is hard winning this matchup. The Baron buff absolutely helps, but he is still very favored once he has 2 items, and Camille does not. And map is continuing to fall apart. Golden Guardians right now should be looking to probably send Aatrox to the top lane. Shove out mid wave, chunk down, or even take mid lane inner turret. And most importantly, maintain enough pressure onto these turrets that Optic are forced to be there defending them. And as a result, Optic are unable to move into the blue side jungle, because that will guarantee the Infernal Drake, which is coming up. On top of that, having control over the Optic jungle for extended periods of time, which is what happens when you have this kind of advantage, is monumental for Kindred. She's going to pick up a bunch of random stacks because of this, which is another significant advantage onto the side of Golden Guardians. There's very little that Optic can do at this point. Ultimately, what they need is a Tom Kench plus J4. They need a Tom Kench to bring in J4, ultimately, onto members who are caught out inside of this 1-3-1. We see pretty much exactly that happen here. But the double teleport, or not even the double teleport, the Golden Guardians just... Oh yeah, the double teleport comes through. Let me back up so we can watch this fight again. So Froggen stays top a little bit long, you could argue. The turret was going to die anyway. But again, double teleport comes through. There's stopwatches on the side of the Golden Guardians. And yeah, Arrow dies. That's kind of exactly what Optic need. That's the only way they can accomplish much of anything. But because there is double teleport, and because they split up at the end of this fight, it just doesn't work out for them, right? Look at Arrow. He passed right on top of the double teleport. Yeah, he has to run away from Contracts, because Contracts does absolutely win a fight with him at this point. But Arrow's just walking right on top of 2 people. 2 aggressive bursty frontliners. How do you justify that? Right? imagine Arrow, instead of sitting here on top of two people trying to DPS Ollie, imagine Arrow and Meteos just go this way and just go right after Contracts, who is very much out of position. He's not close to the two teleporters. He is not like near his teammates by the glacial fissure whatsoever. Contracts is much more out of position here and would be a much more viable target for the side of Optic. However, they dogpile onto Aatrox and Lissandra, and sure, they kill the Varus. That was very poor flash and heal from Deathly. He was dead there. But they suicide to do so. They put themselves into a position where they've used all of their fighting tools, and the very fed Aatrox and the very fed Lissandra are about to be right on top of their AD carry with all of their mobility still up. So the fight goes very sideways for Optic, as expected. Arrow was not able to do what Kog'Maw wants to do because, again, he stood on top of those two teleports. There isn't a front line. Realistically, for Optic, all of the melee champions on the side of Optic want to be diving onto Deathly. They don't want to be trying to deal with Lissandra and Aatrox, and leaving Kog'Maw Kench alone to deal with Lissandra Aatrox is never going to be successful. So even if they had a gold lead, Optic would be hard-pressed to be winning a lot of these fights. Zilean would have to get really impactful double bombs onto important members of Golden Guardians, and Camille needs to be able to basically one-shot Deathly. And even then, Arrow is going to have a really hard time dealing with all of these people, dealing with all of this pressure from Lissandra Aatrox. It's really a terrible situation. It's a very poor draft from Optic that lost the early game, lost the mid game, and even once it gets to the late game, doesn't really stand much of a chance because of how disynergistic it is. So Golden Guardian's going to pick up, for this, they're going to pick up the Infernal Drake, and they're going to pick up the bottom lane inhibitor. It is now very easy for Golden Guardians to close out the game. I have no idea what Optic is doing here. They have no right to be this far forward. Yes, they've set up an advanced ward line. Okay, let's back this up a bit. So Meteos is here, and Dokla is hard engaging under the turret here. I think Dokla decided he was bored of this game and wanted to force Golden Guardians to finish the game. You are down more than 10% gold. You have no inhibitor in the bottom lane. You do not need this turret at all. Your jungler is not there, and is not going to be there until after the enemy jungler arrives. So you are opting into a 4v5 fight. Yes, he nukes down Deathly, and Deathly dies really quick. That's fine. He uses all of his abilities, all of his cooldowns to do that. So, yeah, Deathly's out of the fight, but so is Dokla, pretty much. So there's no way that fight is ever going to be won on the side of Optic. There's no way you're accomplishing anything. They had no right to be that far up the map, especially with their inhibitor gone. It really comes across as Optic felt like they had done nothing all game and wanted to do something, which is just poor strategy. That's a poor mental state and poor mental game. It felt, or like Optic was tired of playing League of Legends and wanted the game to end, and said, you know what, we don't need to go to playoffs. I'm tired of this game. Let's go. Overall, really poor game out of Optic. Their pick ban was abysmal, and it left them with kind of not much agency and not much that they could be doing on the map. And Golden Guardians played to that, right? They went into the game with a massive advantage, and they just kind of took that advantage. They were a little bit sloppy in how they closed out the game. They could have pressed those advantages a little bit better, but they did a really solid job of basically taking what Optic gave them for free and turning that into a game win. So solid from GGS, not so great from Optic. That's pretty much all there is to say. This has been Optic versus the Golden Guardians. I'm John Valentine. Thanks for watching.